Every year, I like to come up with a super stash busting blanket project, and 2024 is no different. This year, I am working granny mitered squares to correspond with each book that I am reading. Each month, I will have a variety of different mitered granny squares, and at the end of the year, I will sew them all together to create a wonderful memory blanket of my reading in 2024. And this is a great way to use up some yarn. So let's take a look at all of the books that I read in January 2024. The first book that I read was called The X by Alafair Burke. So this book is sort of a murder, mystery, thriller, legal type of book. I wasn't sure how I would like it. However, it really flowed pretty well. It was a quick read. This book I listened to on an audiobook, which made it even quicker because I could do other things like crochet while I was listening to this book. Generally, the book is about an attorney who is in New York City and is suddenly thrown into this murder mystery type thing, legal drama of her ex-boyfriend. And as she is trying to figure out what happened, what may or may not have happened, she discovers all of these extra little secrets. So there's lots of sort of twists and turns in this one, and it actually kept my attention quite a bit. The colors that I chose for this are blue, gray, and the Sparkle by Mary Maxim. I think it's a glimmer in blue. And I really like how the colors kind of complemented each other. And I was basing the colors on the cover of the book. I am working these mitered granny squares in 5 rows. I did 2 rows in the gray, 2 rows in the Mary Maxim glimmer in blue, and then 1 final row around the outer 2 sides in this sort of sea blue. My overall rating for The X by Alafair Burke is 4 out of 5 stars. The second book that I read via audio tape was One Italian Summer by Rebecca Serle. Now, I did not like this book much at all. There were parts that were engaging and entertaining, and there were parts that were just too repetitive. So I only gave this a 1 out of 5 stars. However, I absolutely love the colorway that I picked for this mitered granny square. The book is about a young woman who is having some relationship trouble. She just lost her mother to cancer, and she kind of just needs to get away from her life for a little bit. So she goes off to Italy, and a whole bunch of things happen. She meets people, and it's sort of like almost a fantasy time travel, which I wasn't expecting, and so that really threw me off. However, the cover of the book was so Italian and so summery, and it just drew me in. So, of course, I had to pick some blue, coral, and yellow real summery kind of Italian colors for this mitered square. So overall, I only gave this book a 1 out of 5 stars, but I do love the granny square. The next book that I read or listened to was called The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This book is about a whole bunch of different characters. We start off with a young woman who is coming to Paris to find her brother. She actually needs to stay with her brother because she got into some trouble in England, and she gets to his apartment and he's not answering, and she meets a whole cast of characters who live in that apartment complex building. And this book, again, is sort of like a mystery thriller. You don't know who to trust. You get a little insight into each character, and they all have a little something to hide. So it makes it a very interesting read. However, there are so many characters that at times I was a little confused as to who was who and who did what or didn't do what. The colors that I chose for this Granny Square are sort of a dark pink, a very light purple, and a darker blue. And I was really trying to capture that cover art with the sort of pink writing for the title and then kind of a darker background with that dark kind of blue color. So that is why I have outlined this granny in the darker blue. And in the middle, I used that light purple just to kind of break up those two darker colors. Overall, 3 out of 5 stars. Book number 4 is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This book is about a woman journalist who suddenly finds herself in a cruise ship with a bunch of, again, very kind of shady characters, and she finds herself in a whole web of mystery and drama, and she doesn't know who she should trust, who she can trust, who she shouldn't trust, and who is trying to sort of hinder her way of escaping this cruise ship. So this was really intriguing because if you think about it, what worse place to be than on a cruise ship in the middle of some large body of water with really no way to escape? I chose a blue-gray, a green, and a light blue to represent that water. Overall, 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is Camino Island by John Grisham. This is your typical John Grisham legal type novel. It's basically about some criminals that stole some manuscripts, signed manuscripts from like Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and made a lot of money off of those stolen manuscripts. So if you haven't guessed it already, these manuscripts are hiding out in Camino Island. The FBI sends in sort of an undercover person to try to find out who might have it and where they're keeping it and where they're even located. And of course, it's on Camino Island. So the colors that I chose are a green, a mustard yellow, and a blue. These are sort of islandy colors, but in a dark way because this wasn't your typical fun island type of novel. Overall, I'm giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars, but I do love the granny. The next book that I read was called One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This is a teen type book, murder mystery, thriller in a way. There are 4 teens who are trying to figure out which one of them, if any, had anything to do with another student's death. This is the first installment of a series of 3, I think, and I really enjoyed this first book a lot, so I made a note to add the second and third to my want to read list on Goodreads. And without getting into any spoilers, I will say that the writing was well done. I did listen to this on an audiobook, but that didn't take away from the enjoyment at all. And the characters are pretty well developed, and while some you may not relate to or even like, you can kind of get an idea of their motives behind the things they do. So the colors that I chose for this mitered square were a sort of a gray blue, a white, and a pink. For the book, 3 out of 5 stars. For the granny, 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in January was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I read this on Kindle, and surprisingly, I found it very entertaining, very enlightening, informative. I'm not like a huge Britney Spears fan, but I did kind of grow up with her music, at least in my later teens and early 20s. So I really enjoyed this book, seeing sort of the behind the scenes of her life, some of her personal struggles, obviously the struggles with her family. I always find biographies and autobiographies really interesting to see what the public isn't shown during certain events. So for me, this book was really entertaining, really informative. I really enjoyed reading it much, much more than I thought I would. The colors for this square, white, pink, and black. I thought these colors fit Britney and the Queen of Pop perfectly. I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. And the Granny, 5 out of 5, of course. Coming in at number 8 is Dirk Gentley's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams. Before I get into the confusion of that book, which isn't a bad thing, let me explain that that is why I am using all variegated colors for this square. I picked absolute random variegated yarns and just threw them together because that is how I felt about this book. If you like British humor, you will love this book. I think there was too much trying to be crammed into it. However, I found it entertaining, confusing, brilliant, and confusing, and crazy, and wild, and out there, and all of those things came together into just the most bizarre book I've ever read. The book gets 3 stars, the Granny gets 5 stars, of course. The next book is called The Family Next Door by Sally Hepworth. This is a family drama based in Australia, and I absolutely love Sally Hepworth's writing, and there's twists and turns, and it really keeps you engaged. You kind of get invested in some of the characters, and you sometimes hate other characters. But if you like plots that twist and turn, then this one might be a good one for you. The colors that I picked for this are based on the cover art: mustard, sort of a gray blue, and a light blue. Overall, I'm giving this book 4 out of 5 stars, and of course, I love how the Granny turned out too. Number 10, The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapena. I started out really enjoying this, and I listened to it on an audiobook, and like I said, I started out really enjoying it, and about midway through, it wasn't ringing true to me, and I found myself sort of not paying close attention to the characters. I didn't really enjoy the characters. I didn't really care how the story turned out. So this one was a bit of a disappointment for me. The colors in this one are red, black, and mustard. I love how the Granny came out, but for the book, it's only 3 out of 5 stars. The 11th book that I read is One of Us Is Next by Karen M. McManus. This is the second installment in the 3 series starting with One of Us Is Next. It follows 4 different students all trying to figure out some murder mystery type thing, and they're all very suspect of one another. I also enjoyed this one a lot. You follow, well, they're new characters. You do get some of the characters from the original story. The colors I chose for this are black, red, and blue to kind of match that cover art. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. And, of course, the Granny Square turned out beautifully. The next book I read is called The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. This book takes place in a remote location in Scotland. A bunch of people get together and they're in this sort of cabin, I guess, in the middle of nowhere in Scotland. And there's one person in particular that has a vendetta or is out for revenge against one of the other people. And again, it's a murder mystery thriller. I actually enjoyed this one a lot, and I would recommend it if you like the sort of murder mystery thriller and almost a psychological aspect as well. The colors for this square are more woodsy inspired than anything else. I went with a gray blue, a mustard, and a green to represent that sort of Scottish, woodsy, middle of nowhere kind of feeling that I got from this book. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read in January is called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, written by Stuart Turton. And I don't even know where to start on this book. This was one of the most creative and brilliantly written books that I have read in a long time. There are a lot of characters, and I did find that I got confused as to who was who and who did what, but overall, the concept of this story had me from page 1. I really wish I had more rounds in these mitered granny squares because there is so much I wanted to put into the square for this book. But the colors that I wound up with are black, gray, and mustard. Now this is a very long book, but despite that, I am giving it 5 out of 5. I almost didn't want it to end. 5 out of 5 stars for this book, a wonderful way to end January, and just look at that square. So here are all of my squares from January. I just love how these are turning out and how this is going to be such a memory blanket at the end of the year. So stay tuned. February's video is right around the corner. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, happy crocheting. Bye.